Welcome to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Your host, Steve Hudgens, is a licensed professional counselor, and your co-host, Julia Canton, is a therapeutic coach. Together, they discuss various topics, providing a different perspective on life and insight that you are not alone. On a non-emergency basis, you may contact them at area code 918-280-8690 or coachsoul.com to provide them with new topics, feedback, or to request an appearance on the show. And now, here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
Welcome back, and what a beautiful, gorgeous day today. And I don't know about you, Julia, but it's just a bright, shiny day. And I've got these 70s songs, Beatles, Bee Gees going on my head about the sunshine. I don't know. Sometimes those things just pop in my head randomly. What do you think?
I think today is a gorgeous summer day. In fact, I'm sitting outside and a helicopter just went by. They got neighbors that are mowing, and I'm just loving this morning sunrise and the birds singing. And it is a beautiful day to have a beautiful day. So that's where I'm going to take that one.
You know, sometimes when we're on the mountaintop, and we see all this beauty that surrounds us, and then all of a sudden, it's like life takes that sledgehammer and just bam, like Thor out of nowhere, just bangs us upside the head. And it takes a while to come to our senses. And what do we do when life is so good and we hit a crisis and we would just want to shut down?
I love this topic. Well, first of all, I think that what I want to tell our listeners, or what we probably should share with them, is the importance of finding a way to love ourselves while we're processing through the crisis. Oftentimes, Steve, and you're very aware of this, that when a crisis shows up, depending on the degree, if we forget our grocery list at the grocery store, by the time we get to the grocery store, that might be a small little crisis if we didn't remember what was on the list, but we're going to easily transition through it. We're going to go, oh, okay, well, I'll just get what I need. But when it is a death of a loved one, or it's a major loss of a job where you've been there, pretty much your entire life, a relationship that you have been in, those kinds of things, or it could be a health issue. These crises, they show up that are just a little bit, they appear to be a little bit, maybe a whole lot bigger than a lost grocery list. And so how do we process that while we're continuing to love ourselves at the highest grade that we can, so that we heal in ways that teach us to grow through the experiences versus shutting our lives down?
That's a good point that you bring up, Julia. It's the fact that, I don't think sometimes we're aware of doing body inventory. It's gathering the facts of body inventory. Well, what do I mean by that? Does that mean I've got 2 hands, 10 toes, all those? No, that's not that kind of inventory. The inventory is noticing how your body feels. Sometimes like this morning, I just woke up and it's like, I'm not really hungry. And so that's an inventory. Well, how do I feel? And at this point in time, it's because I'm doing this fast and I'm not really that hungry. I will probably be later this evening because it'll be kicking in about 24 hours already. So it's getting awareness about your body, and then checking in with your emotions. How do I feel? Do I feel sad or happy or angry? There's a mixed array of emotions when crisis hit. And that's that dazed feeling I think sometimes we feel. But once we start checking in with ourselves, then we can be able to look at, okay, how do I feel? What do I need to do? Do I need to shut down? Do I need to go and talk to somebody? But the natural tendency, you look at the animal kingdom, and what do the animals do? They recluse. They pull back. they start looking the wounds, so to speak. And for humans, the natural tendency is to do that. The question is, do we give ourselves permission to do so?
Well, I think that there is a difference between the process of withdrawing for a moment and experiencing everything that's showing up versus withdrawing and shutting down. And so I think first if we're going to go through that process, that we need to ask the question, are we trying to hide from the pain that we're experiencing in this crisis, or are we trying to process? Those are two, asking those questions is important, because sometimes the pain can be so unbearable in its expression that we do want to just kind of go, I'm just going to go to sleep. And then the next, you take a nap, and then you're going to go to sleep for a few more hours. And then before long, you just want to take naps all the time. And you're in this mode of potential depression and other, psychological crises going on.
So you gave the perfect example of flushing it out. And sometimes I don't think we want to flush things out. And so we tend to avoid, oh my gosh, avoidant attachment disorder. See, I think a lot of times the way we deal with crisis is how we dealt with our attachment issues. So it kind of combines together of our attachment, and there, we did a bunch of series on attachment and want to invite our listeners to go back, and they are recorded, and you can look at it at podcast.google.com for Coach Soul, and you can see all the podcasts there. But I do look at that attachment has a way or a style of how we approach the crisis at hand.
Well, I think that generally speaking, that is an accurate statement, that our attachment styles do tend to play a major part in how we process crises. But I would like to interject another idea, which is, despite whatever our attachment styles are, that during the crisis, if we can ask questions, different questions. For instance, some of the work that Byron Katie does, I love her so much, because when she actually has a set of about 4 or 5 questions that she invites the practitioner or participant in their own lives, their own crisis, to ask themselves, okay? And when you go through this, is this a true statement? I feel abandoned right now, out of this, let's just say, a relationship, okay? Or I feel intense loss because my spouse passed away recently. Is that a true statement? And on the surface, most are probably, I would think that it'd be a typical natural answer to say, yes, it's very true. I mean, why are you asking such a stupid question? But the next question would be, is it is it this, or is it that? Do I feel abandonment, or do I fear loss? Am I afraid of losing some sense of my identity, or am I grieving an absence? And the questions just keep breaking down and breaking down, when in fact the very first reaction or answer was, I feel abandonment, and it ended up being something completely different, but the words that came out were the only thing that the brain could identify as being true in that moment. But given different questions, then the answer becomes something quite different.
It's difficult, though, sometimes to draw out these questions if we never dealt with these before. In some cases, some people, they just, it's the norm of shutting down or walking away. And one of the things that, too, I want to bring out is, if somebody is going through this process and tends to shut down, we want to be able to be respectful of that person's space. And a lot of times in dealing with couples, that spouse wants to go and say, hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And a lot of times you're elevating or escalating the turmoil in that other person. And so by allowing that space, can help that person to be able to process what's going on with them. Our natural tendency is we don't want to see people hurt. And so we want to be supportive. We want to be able to be there for them. And so that natural tendency is to push to say, okay, what's wrong? But a lot of times we don't know what's wrong, and it's difficult. And Julia, I mean, for a female, it's even harder to process sometimes, I think, for females, because although you may not know exactly pinpoint what's wrong, and sometimes the men want to come in and fix it because we see what's wrong. I'm relating to a YouTube video called "It's Not About the Nail." And I really like it because she's sitting there, she's got a nail on her forehead. She's trying to explain to her husband, and he'll say, well, you know, you have a nail. And she says, stop trying to fix it. And it's allowing her to process those thoughts and being able to get them out. But I think that's the hardest part, is when we're in this mode, it's hard to figure out our emotions. Because I relate it to being in the ocean and all these waves are crashing around us and we just don't know how to get out of the situation. So when I think about being in this crisis mode, that we have to be mindful, or we should be mindful of being able to self-care. And I believe self-care is very important. You just got through working through some self-care yourself in a moment of crisis that you went to the mountains and everything. I'm fixing to do some self-care. I'm going on a cruise alone, my first cruise ever, and I'm going on a cruise alone. What do you think about somebody that, you know, the society is like, you're going on a cruise alone? Really? You know, what are your thoughts about somebody doing something that drastic, I guess, in people's eyes about going on a cruise alone? What are your thoughts about self-care?
Well, I think that number one, even remotely caring about what others think about how what an individual chooses to self-care is that where we first get out of alignment with ourselves. Or we're
Right.
not even, we're already out of the space that allows us to feel and monitor what's going on inside of us. Okay, so that's the first thing. Two, understanding that self-care, there's maintenance, okay, like going to get your nails done or your hair, and that's girls, we like doing that stuff. Guys do too, but that is a thing. But self-care really is about taking the time, whether it's to go to a mountain for 30 days like I did, or to go on a cruise by yourself. Sometimes it's going to a movie theater. You know, I have some friends that they'll just go take themselves to the movie or take themselves to dinner. It's about getting alone with yourself and really intensely asking yourself, what do I need to do today to meet my needs versus expecting someone else to do it for us. And I love the analogy of, and you brought it up a while ago and touched on it. It's like being in the ocean and you're just the crisis is just bombarding you with, you're out there on you got the driftwood and you're trying to hang on to it and the waves are coming through and they're knocking you around and da 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 da. Well, sometimes you want to swim. Sometimes you're going to go under and you're going to think you're going to drown. Sometimes there is no fighting the wave that's coming through. The self-care comes in and just riding the wave, floating along with it, going along with its groove and being congruent with it versus trying to fight against it. And those moments are the self-care. They're allowing us to tend to what is showing up. And and I'll touch on what you said as well, that when our spouse or our significant other or loving family member or friend or whatever comes in and they want to rush in and try to fix it, or they want to rush in and give advice about based on their experiences and things along those lines, that more often than not, it is a let me take that out of the dialogue there. It is important to respect the space of the individual that's in the crisis, that they need. And especially, like you said, they may not know how to define what's going on inside themselves, and they need time to process that. So just sending a simple text or, I love you. I can see that something is going on. When you are ready to speak about it, if you need me to listen, I'm there. If you want me to contribute in conversation, I'm there. Otherwise, just know I am here when you're ready. And then that way, there's no judgment, there's no interpretation, there's no expectations. It's just an awareness space that if they want to take advantage of that to help them do their self-care, they have it. And so a lot of times it is that self-care is riding the wave, and it looks different though for every individual.
Totally agree. It's giving yourself some space too, and not having to feel like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, I got to do this, and feel overwhelmed that you're feeling compelled that you have to continue to do something. I think about sometimes when that crisis hit, it's like the egg experience in science. You have this egg strapped to this car, and you push the car, and all of a sudden the car comes to a stop, but the egg continues to hit forward. And sometimes I feel like I'm that egg and I just go splat. So it's like, what do you do? It's Humpty Dumpty. Let's put everybody back together again. And it's gathering these emotions and things. And so for me, self-care is, although I'm not in a crisis mode, although, relationships can be tough, one of the things that I wanted to do about this cruise is to do something that I've never done before, to push myself
Mm-hmm.
out of a comfort zone, to
Yes,
have a
yeah,
different kind of experience.
yes.
And I've never been on a cruise. I've been in all kinds of planes. I've been in all kinds of trains. Now it's like I got that movie going in my head now, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy. It's that episode of all the crises that hit them too. And it's how do you deal with it? And a lot of it has to do with the attitude. So I'm going into the attitude with a cruise that I'm just going to soak in the experience, even though it might be, I don't know, sometimes it gets a little stressful because you got to catch this plane, you got to make sure your baggage is there. But I'm going to alleviate some of my stress by carrying my baggage on, and I'm going to have a carry on. Well, stress is like a baggage. How are you packing your bag? How are you going to unpack your bag? And so the cruise to Alaska, I'm looking forward to, because part of one of the excursions I'm going to go on is an ATV excursion where the driver, if I'm sitting there and I'm driving up, the passenger takes turns and drives it back down again. And just the majestic beauty that I've seen on YouTube videos of this excursion is going to be phenomenal. And it's that self-care, it's that rejuvenization that you need for your soul.
Mm-hmm.
So I like how you differentiated, because in some of my counseling sessions, I encourage people to go and do some self-care. And they're saying, well, I get my nails done, I get my hair done. That's maintenance. And you're so right about that. Thank you for sharing that it's maintenance. There's a differentiation between maintenance and self-care.
Yes, and it took me, by the way, discovered that out on the mountain, because I would have argued 30 days prior to this conversation, I would have argued that going to go get my nails was self-care. And I had to come to the conclusion that there is in fact, I would have argued with it until I bled out. I mean, that's how convinced I was that that was self-care. But that was because I did not yet understand how to self-love in a
Mm.
different way. And another example of that, because out on the mountain my food changed, and I realized that I had become addicted. And then there actually addictions are, and we are addicted to a lot of things, and we don't even realize that we are addicted to it. Mine was using food to compensate.
Mm.
And the thing was is that I was eating fairly healthy. I was eating, in fact, I say I probably eat healthier than the most people that I know. But it was the relationship with the food that mattered. It was the excuses I would use. Oh, I can go and have, this coffee with a ton of creamer in it today, and then tomorrow I might have this vegan chocolate, dessert, and then I might, whatever it was, because I would justify that as being self-care. What I learned was that none of that has to do with learning to love who I am. And I, at this moment, do not yet have the words to express or tell somebody how to do that. But my relationship with food has changed now, because I ask myself, when I'm sitting in front of an amazing looking dessert, or I'm thinking about going to go do my nails. Okay. My nails, they stay beautiful for the most part, but that is a maintenance thing. But it's not how I say I love you to me. Eating that chocolate cake, I'm not saying don't ever eat this beautiful chocolate dessert. What I do ask myself is in this moment, am I showing myself the highest love and vibration that I can give me right now? Now, some would argue that eating the chocolate is self-care if they're in the middle of a
Mhm.
crisis, okay? But what it actually is a compensation to avoid the pain. And so, whether they realize it or not, they are choosing to injure self, because that injury is a lot lighter than feeling the pain that they're trying to avoid. And so if it comes to, for me, if I look at that cake and I go, oh, I would love to have some of that, and I've done other things to say I love you, then I might take a bite. Otherwise, I look at it and I just say I appreciate the offer, but I'm choosing to say I love you to myself in a different way in this moment. And that is self-care. That is the ultimate self-care. When we look at ourselves and we look at the world around us, how are we using the world to demonstrate our highest level of love for who we are? And I want to go into a different topic on that, because oftentimes we pull others into trying to negotiate, navigate, and fill the gaps of love that and with expectations that they will do it for us, that we have not yet learned to do for ourselves. So I know that was a whole bucket of stuff there, but
That's okay. We can pour the bucket out, or I don't want to kick the bucket. That gives another connotation.
kick my bucket.
So, it may be a bucket full, but we can break these things down for our listeners too, and understanding the importance that it's about self-awareness, being able to take the body inventory, being able to take an emotional inventory, pulling these things together, and it's not all is lost. It may seem like the Titanic is sinking, but at the same time, what steps are we doing in our attitude in facing the things that we're facing? And, you shared with me off mic is that, you look at the sunshine and you just take it in, and it's having this positive attitude waking up. And I believe that's where we need to go, is having the attitude of being thankful where we are today, thankful for uh, what we have encountered, the things that we do go through, although as harsh it may be, it is a blessing in disguise sometimes. Like, okay, Steve, are you a glutton for a punishment? No, I'm not. I just look at some of the things that I've been through as made me become a better person because I've allowed it. And if we allow these things to happen, we get through our valleys a lot quicker. But it's very important for us to be mindful about ourselves and not causing self-injury, whether it's chocolate shake or a chocolate cake. Anything chocolate is good. It's a challenge for us to be able to understand the importance. And I think that's a good segue into another podcast about dealing with how do we pull people in, but more of dealing with feelings of guilt. We really haven't addressed feelings of guilt and what does that do to our system? What does that do to our body? What does that do to other people and our attitude? So we're out of time. Julia, thank you so much again for sharing your experience on the mountain. And I'm ready to go on to another mountaintop in Alaska here soon. So looking forward to it. Until then, be safe and have fun.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe and be kind.